Can I ask you a question? Do you hunger for revival? I'm not talking about, sometimes you'll see on a marquee as you drive around, you'll see revival meeting Sunday night. Those are usually evangelistic outreach services. Revival is when there's an inbreaking of God. God begins to bring deep conviction. God's people begin to demonstrate different characteristics and lives are transformed. We need revival. And Habakkuk, in his book, in a dark time, he cried out and he said, oh God, he said, send revival. Basically, chapter 3, I think it's verse 2, he says, revive thy works in our day, make them known. We need to cry out for revival and understand the keys, the secrets. I'm going to tell you, listen. I long for revival. I've traveled all over, really, in my day. I went, when I heard of the revival in Seoul, Korea with Youngie Cho and almost 1 million people in the church, I went there. Youngie Cho prayed for me. When I went to Northampton, Massachusetts, the site of the First Great Awakening, Jonathan Edwards, I was there, and it was amazing to just walk around and to think this is where this awakening, this move of God took place that reformed the colonies in that day. And then you go on to Oberlin College, Charles Finney. I spoke there. I was there. And I thought about Finney and the Second Great Awakening and the impact and how society was changed. And then you go on, Lou Engle and I, a dear friend of mine, we were there on Bonnie Bray Street with the start where the whole Azusa Street revival broke loose that shook the world to this day. And how about going to Calvary Chapel in California, the Jesus Revolution? We were in the midst of it. We had 2,000 in Washington, D.C. that came out of that. And then I had the honor for 5 years to be in the Pensacola, the Brownsville Revival. And I ask leaders that are in it and experience it, what are the keys? What are the secrets? And two of the heroes that I have had in my life, obviously, number one is Billy Graham. Billy Graham, when I met him, I told him there's nobody that was used by God more than him as a hero in my Christian life. And then Steve Hill from the Brownsville Revival. Can you imagine this revival in Pensacola, to be there and teaching regularly and then to be a part of something like this? And the beauty of it was this, think of it, for 5 years, God moved incredibly. 4.5 million people came from all over the globe. 500,000 people, think of this, 500,000 converted. Folks, 18% crime drop in the city. You say, Larry, we need revival in our day. Well, there are secrets to it. And we honor Billy Graham. I do. You know that just last week, what did they do? In Statuary Hall, right on the Capitol, in the Capitol building, they unveiled a statue about 7 feet tall, bronze, honoring Billy Graham as a preacher of the gospel and a man who engaged in civic action in his day. He did. And he was honored for that. So you say, well, Larry, what have you learned? Well, I've learned a lot, and I've watched and I've cried out to God with you. When Steve Hill, who was the primary evangelist at the Brownsville Revival, right prior to his death, he took me in his study and he gave me a book. And this is a book, it's 130 years old. It says, In Darkest England, The Way Out. And it was a strategy that there would be revival and transformation in the city. And he gave it to me. And I want to share with you the secrets. These men, if you read, if you study their lives, they will primarily focus in, I'd say, on 3 secrets. Are you ready? Number 1 would be this, humility. These are easy to remember because they all have H. Humility. Billy Graham was a humble man. Before they had their crusades in a city, you know what they would do? For a year, they would humble themselves and pray and organize prayer gatherings that would go on every week for a year prior. What does it say in 2 Chronicles? It says, if my people who are called by my name will what? Humble themselves and pray. Turn from their wicked ways. You go to there and then God says, I'm going to come and change and heal the land. So we sometimes skip over, we'll humble themselves and pray and we just cry out, oh God, move. But we've got to fulfill conditions. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And Billy was a man also, if you read his life, when he reached a place early on in his ministry where he struggled with some issues, some doctrines he didn't understand, he took a Bible, he put it on a tree stump, and he said, God, I don't understand everything here, but I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to believe it, and I'm going to preach it, which he did. Imagine, he went and reached 215 million people in his lifetime, 185 nations, and he experienced revival. Powerful. And you know what? If you read his books, even prior to his death, they asked, would you do anything different? He humbled himself. He said, yeah, I wish I had spent more time, with my family, refused to be pressured into speaking. The one time that I met him, I had a divine appointment in a lobby, and he said, Larry, stay in the book. Stay in the book. He pointed to his Bible. Tell those young people in the Jesus movement. And so he was a humble man. How about Steve Hill? Yes, Steve Hill was a humble man. He was a man given to prayer. He was a man that really, this was beautiful. One day, I remember he said something in a sermon, and I thought, uh-oh, I went through a lawsuit once because of some misstatement. And I remember I asked him, can I talk with you? Yeah. The next day, we were talking. He was so teachable and humble to receive input and correction. Humility is at the base and the core, first of all, for real revival and a move of God. Number two, after humility, would be this. And this one is interesting, and I would say it's an interesting one because we sometimes pull away from this. And you know what it is? I wrote it down here. They told me, they said this, it's hunger for God. In other words, when you would meet Steve Hill, you know what he'd say? Are you still on fire for God? He'd say, are you still hungry for God? And you need to cultivate it as a deer pants after the water brook. And Billy Graham, he saw the abuses in the 50s and that with evangelists, some of the nonsense, and he met with his team in Modesto, California, and they wrote down a number of commitments that they said, we are going to pledge our lives, that we are not going down this corrupt and these scandalous paths. And what was that? They hungered for God. When Billy Graham went to New York for a crusade, you can see the pictures of it. You know what? They were going to have a crusade for a number of days. It went 16 weeks. You say 16 weeks. The pictures, they filled Yankee Stadium. That was genuine revival in their day. They were not content with, just a nice service here or there. They would go on. And so you look at these men and you see throughout history, people that experience revival, they're hungry for God. Lou Engle is a dear friend of 40-some years, and Lou lived a couple doors down from me. And Che Ahn, another revivalist, man, I love that guy, came to me once. He said, Larry, will you disciple me? Well, I humbled myself. I said, I'll do my best. But these guys hunger for God. It was Che that said, let's go to Seoul, Korea. Let's see and learn what's going on. Lou always, with that voice, he'll say, stay hungry for God. Let's reach out. Let's cry out to God. It's genuine. All right. You say, what's the third secret? Well, the third secret is holiness, humility, hunger for God, and holiness. Without holiness, no man will see the Lord. When people are condoning sin, allowing sin, no wonder the Spirit of God is quenched and grieved. We can't see a real reviving and a moving of God in our day. Steve Hill was a man, you know what the statement was always at the Brownsville Revival? Get the sin out of your life. People would run forward to kneel, and I remember leaders. I won't even mention any names, but people crying out and saying, my God, get this out of my life. I don't want any pornography. I don't want to be looking at wrong things. And when we taught, I privileged at the school with Dr. Michael Brown, and my son went there, my daughter. You know what? We would emphasize happy holiness, and not in some legalistic way, but out of love for God. And Billy Graham was the same way, holiness. And you know what? People say, well, I want to be just like Billy. I don't want to get into the political. Some of the stuff Andy Stanley and Rick Warren and John Maxwell and that, stay out of the political. No. We need to be engaged. Billy was. You say, well, he just preached the gospel. He preached the gospel, but boy, he took a clear stand against segregation in his day. He took a clear stand on same-sex marriage. He wouldn't tolerate it. I got booted from a church because he said it's a deal breaker. We don't want to go there. But Billy and his son Frank took out a full page in the Charlotte Observer, and they stated the biblical design for marriage. They didn't pull any punches. And how about Billy on his stand with communism? He took a clear stand. And so when you look at these qualities and you say, are these essentials, non-negotiables? Absolutely. But we should cry out in our day. And there will be persecution. Persecution. Let me tell you this. I was mocked recently. There's a guy in England, reaches millions, and on his comedy show, a book I wrote, he made fun of it. Watch this.
Local government sources, and they're typically overseen by a local library board, which can either be elected or appointed by members of the local government. And librarians actually get rid of books all the time through a process known as weeding. Weeding is done for all sorts of good reasons, like a book being out of date, severely damaged, or simply so weird no one wants to check it out anymore. Books like Body Watching is Fun, Latanya the Naughty Horse Learns to Say No to Drugs, and the Christian child discipline classic, God, the Rod, and Your Child's Bot. Fun fact, a new copy of that is currently selling on Amazon for $214. So if you don't want to pay that, you better hope your local library has it. Or you know what? You can actually just borrow my copy here instead. It's fine. But what we're talking about...
You know what? Blessed are those that are persecuted. And so we don't look for it, but we're not going to shrink back. Billy Graham told us, courage is contagious. So let's cry out that as we're approaching an election, we would see God move in churches, pastors awakening, not shrinking back anymore, preaching boldly the word of God, compassionately, uncompromising. We need, like Habakkuk, to cry out and say, revive your works in our day, in your day, make them known.
Hey friends, if you felt this video was helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified once new videos become available. Thanks.